The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.
Silly Goose Gang back online, episode 24, and tonight we're joined by Joel Struthers, French Foreign Legion, System D podcast, and author of Appel. Joel, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me on, and good day to, or good evening to your side of the water in Scotland from Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah, it's like I was saying before we started, Joe, for a run of military men on, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. I think you've got a realistic viewpoint of the world, and it's always fun to talk to you and get your ideas and your views and things. So yeah, thanks for coming.
Appreciate the opportunity, 100%.
Yeah. Just I seen you had before. You had was that an Oilers cap you had on?
Yeah, representing the Edmonton Oilers. I don't know, they're a good team. Famous for Wayne Gretzky. I grew up in Alberta, where Edmonton is the one of the large cities in Alberta, and always a fan. I get a lot of grief for it, but hey, such is life, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Maybe I'll wear it. There we go.
We have I used not anymore really, but there's a hockey team 3 miles from here, the Five Flyers.
Yeah,
Shout out to the Five Flyers. So they had a few Canadians, a few. Do you know Laurie Boschman ended up coming over here late in his career?
Sounds familiar. Yeah, Boschman.
Yeah. He came over. He came straight out the NHL and was way too good to be playing in Scotland. But it was cool. It's cool to see guys like that coming over. So But you played hockey. Is that right?
I did. Yeah, I played. It was a short career, Junior A, Tier 2 in a city called, where was it? Lloydminster, and with the Blazers. They've changed names since, but yeah, that was my dream as a young man, was to play hockey. And, I think unfortunately as I got a bit older and a little more aggressive, my game changed, and I thought I was more of an enforcer than a goal scorer. And to be honest with you, I should have stuck with my game, which was scoring goals, because I didn't have the size or the chin to be. But such is life, right? But anyone who made it to the NHL, and then that's quite the life.
Some of those enforcers are big men. Some real big guys.
Exactly. I didn't do my research, unfortunately. I should have.
Who was Gretzky's famous enforcer that travelled with him to the Kings from Edmonton? It was part of the trade. Did he not have a really famous enforcer, or am I making that up? Yeah,
it was Marty McSorley, if I'm not mistaken. He followed him to LA, and was kind of his enforcer. True. Yeah. And I've been to Scotland. I spent a year. My dad was going to staff college in Bracknell, just outside London, with the military there, and we traveled up to check out obviously Inverness, some of the Edinburgh, and fond memories of it's a beautiful part of the world. And I've seen Braveheart like everybody, so I feel like
just for the record, it's 100% historically accurate. Just if you're wondering.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Something I didn't visit was Adrian's Wall is something that I always wanted. Maybe I will. I have relatives that live in Bath. So I might take advantage and then do another trip up into your part of the world. Yeah.
When you look at what the Romans did, the Romans conquered everywhere, and they came up through England, and then they got to the border of Scotland and went, "Fuck that, build a wall."
Fuck that, exactly. Yeah. It says a lot. It's something to be proud of for sure.
It says a lot. Yeah, fucking build a great big wall. Keep those lunatics out. I'm glad.
They reckon that's the inspiration for the wall in Game of Thrones. You see Game of Thrones, Joe?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
The white wall, the big wall. They think that was George R.R. Martin got the idea from Hadrian's Wall, as in anything north of the wall was the wildlings, the crazy bastards. Keep them up out there away from civilization.
No, that would make sense. Yeah.
One thing that I'm glad, just going back a little bit there, Joel, is you said the correct pronunciation of Edinburgh, not like the Americans who say Edinburgh, and it's fucking annoying. So congratulations, you said it properly.
I appreciate that. That's a good start. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how are you finding the podcast life, Joe? The System D podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys can, agree. It's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
It is fun. I mean, I enjoy it because you get to talk to people that typically you wouldn't have the opportunity to do so. And then obviously with the Skype or other platforms, you can do it across the world. But the initial setup has been frustrating. Lessons learned by error. I think I've made all the mistakes, but such is life, right? But the end result, yeah, we're getting there. I mean, at this point, we've done 4, but the people we've had on, proud of. They're interesting characters, things to learn from, and then the learning how to interview people is new to me. So I'm enjoying the process. In short, I won't bore you with the details, but so far so good. And I could see this going on for a while. Yeah,
absolutely. Like it's you're saying you've done 4. We've done. Did you say this was 24, Ali? 24. So
Nice.
we've seen this. We don't come from a background in media or anything. Just 2 friends that went, let's just speak to people, because we're bored. And it's we keep laughing. We keep laughing every time we finish these calls with people like you, and we're like an FBI guy on, and just keep laughing and going, we've been doing this for like fucking 70 days. Do you know? And it's just like we're just learning constantly how to structure things and how to. You have to pay attention in the conversation because there's something you maybe want to come back to, but somebody's in flow, so you don't want to interrupt them. So you have to. A lot of people think, I could do that. You go, oh, okay, do it. This is
no, exactly
really not an easy thing to do. So,
and then also being yourself, I found that's a challenge too. And that's what's good about podcasts is you see the real person, right? It's not staged. It's not media.
No.
You get a real good feeling for the person that's being interviewed, or even the interviewers. You get the truth comes out. But it's also remembering that you can't be yourself 100%, because if you start throwing F-bombs or saying things that can be taken wrong, it can obviously hinders the.
You
have
to be. You have to be super careful, especially in 2020. You have to be. Very careful of what you're saying.
So and as you say, learning how to interview, keeping it flowing. We did one with one of our teammates. It was actually our last one. He was a teammate when I was in the Legion. He's still in. He's an officer, and his English. He's French, so his English wasn't at a level where he felt comfortable answering the questions in English. But we had anticipated doing it in English and just kind of getting through it. But last minute, we decided he wanted to do it in French, so I had to ask the questions in English. And then in French, he would answer in French, and then I would have to translate it into English. So we weren't necessarily 100% prepared. So we got it done, but watching it after, which is not much fun for me, watching yourself or listening to myself talk. But, I could see that I had missed, sometimes I didn't say the question in English, or I missed the translation at the end. And that's definitely a challenge, the bilingual type, which we're probably going to run into a lot more. But you learn, right? You guys, I'm sure from your first podcast to where you are now, I'm sure you guys have come a long way.
Yeah. Just it's funny because, Ali will sometimes say to me, can you just go and check this on YouTube or on Apple? And I hate listening to myself. I don't like listening to myself. It's so weird. I'm such an asshole. But
or watching yourself, watching too. It's tough. Yeah, it's tough.
That's a horrible thing to do. But it's
that's funny.
It's a great fun. It's really good fun. So who thought 2 guys from Scotland, from small villages in Scotland, would talk to, Joe Struthers. It's for us it seems crazy, but we're enjoying doing it, and we'll keep pushing forward. What else is there?
No, good for you.
So it's cool. So
I think one of the things as well. I think one of the things you're saying, Joel, about trying to be yourself is important, because I'm sure you're like us. You listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yep.
And you don't want to be Joe Rogan. You don't want to be Jocko. You don't want to be, insert whoever you listen to. I'm just throwing those 2 names out.
Yeah, no,
but
exactly.
they're so in your mind because you listen to them all the time. But you don't want to be. You don't want to false. We don't want to throw on a mid-Atlantic accent and sound like an MTV guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Trying to be genuine and honest and put a bit of your personality across. It's definitely not as easy as people think.
No, I agree 100%. It's funny you mentioned the Jocko one, because obviously that was my first introduction podcasting and being a guest, and I was it was intimidating. And then I watched it once just to learn, but it was torture, man. And then in that scenario, I think I was the first kind of representation of a Legionnaire on the North African continent type thing, and certainly in that podcast, which has a huge following. So I was a bit, I guess nervous would be the word, and intimidated on how is this going to go, and then being careful on how you come across and what you say, because at the end of the day, you're representing all Legionnaires, albeit, I'm not, but people will watch that, and that will be their first kind of view of, hey, there's an ex-Legionnaire, and that's what they represent. So yeah, that was 4 hours of talking, which I don't talk for 4 hours in 6 months. But so it was a huge learning experience. But I agree with what you say is, being yourself. I'm working on that, and I think it comes across better with time, right? You just learn you learn the game, and you become a little more natural and relaxed, and you come across. Yeah.
So that's interesting, Joel, because I was first aware of you through Jocko's podcast.
Yeah.
That was December. That be right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Early
So
December,
so I listened to it at the time, and then I listened to it, some of it this morning. I listened to the first little bit again, just because because you're trying to figure out how to speak.
Yeah.
And one thing, now that you've said you're nervous, that makes sense, because what I was saying to Ali was, it was like you were given answers, but you weren't saying any more than what was asked of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for
so
sure.
You were saying exactly what was said, and I said to Ali beforehand, like, I wonder if it was like intimidating being with Jocko. Like, I wonder if that's what because because I was saying exactly what we're talking about before. You have to figure out how to structure these conversations and how to ask questions. But that makes sense now that you said you were nervous. That makes complete sense.
And I think you can see at the beginning. Obviously, you walk into. I mean, I watched as many Jocko podcasts as I could before I got there, just so I could understand the way he does things, the setting. And then so when I walked into that room, it wouldn't be totally new. It would feel somewhat comfortable, But then they set up the cameras and they get you all. And, that was my first kick at the cat. And I was like, I'm not an extrovert, I'm more an introvert. So talking about myself is not something that comes easy. But obviously with a book and everything else, you have to get out there and market yourself. So that was part of the beginning of the learning process. But I think when you watch it, I forget, about midway through, I start to forget about the cameras, potentially the people that are watching, because he has a huge following, obviously. And then I kind of get into it a little more. But I'm also power drinking his power drinks, so that helped. I started to get the buzz going, and Anyway, it's the learning.
You can see from, to be fair, even having listened to Jocko for the first time on Tim Ferriss, he was super intense. Intense. Whereas now, even he's become a little bit more relaxed and he flows a little bit better. So, I can see from this podcast, just talking to you now, Joel, to Jocko, you've loosened right up and you now seem way more comfortable. So it's just that, it's just,
Yeah, you bet. Exactly. You get used to the whole game, right? The setting, and and then you get, and that's something too, is answering questions. As you do it more, you kind of get better you're more seasoned at answering and putting your thoughts to your mouth in words, Whereas the Jocko thing, it was like, okay, I gotta answer, but it's gotta be on par with what I'm trying to represent and not say the wrong thing. But it was tough.
The thing that I've struggled with is when you're talking to, even talking to you now, Joel, is try not to sound like a fucking moron.
That's it.
In your head, you're like, okay, don't say something ridiculous, and then that makes you think about it more. You're talking to like doctors and professors, and you're trying to sound like you're not a complete idiot, and it's it's not easy, but
I hear you.
But yeah.
I've been working on that for 49 years, so maybe one day.
Did you feel a pressure then, being the first representative of the Legion? Because sorry, jumping in before you answer that, was my dad was in the Royal Navy for 22 years, late 70s through until the mid 90s. And I remember when I was a young kid, so you're talking the early 80s, he had told me that the Foreign Legion was full of scoundrels and thugs and ruffians, and there was that whole mystique
that was a mystique,
Yeah, if you were in trouble. I mean, I remember my dad saying that there was 2 guys left the boat. They pulled into, I'm sure it was Bordeaux, he said, but one of the ports on the south of France, or somewhere in France anyway, and 2 boys jumped ship and joined the Legion because they were about to get court-martialed potentially in the Navy.
Gotcha.
And that was my entire impression of the Legion growing up.
Yeah.
Up until kind of to an extent, I heard you on Jocko, and obviously you don't seem as much of a scoundrel.
No, you're right. And in all fairness, the Legion certainly attracted those type of individuals in the past, and that was an opportunity for them to go and do something different. But that being said, is when they get there, the Legion picks and chooses who they want. So just because you show up at the door doesn't mean you're in, right? So they've been doing this a long time. They're pretty successful at making the call on who's going to be, going to do the job for them. So, but since then, as you know, we get into obviously with the podcast and then the book Appel, it's come a long way. It's now a part of the French military. They can pick and choose who they want. When I was there, it was like 1 in 12. Now, in talking to Lieutenant Dimitri there this week, it's about 1 in 6. And then the level of person that shows up, IQ wise, life experiences, has come a long way. So yeah, it's definitely a different arm of the military now. You have to show up with a little more depth to get in, if that makes sense. Yeah. And that was a big effort for the book, was to educate people, right? Because there's a lot of misconceptions like that. And when people would mention that or bring it up, I have a hard time explaining in a short conversation the history and my experience. So I just avoided the whole subject matter, but over time I was like, hey, maybe it's on me to write something that represents a Legionnaire. There's bad seeds like in anything. There'll be people that ruin it for everyone. But, the people I worked with, a friend obviously paid the ultimate sacrifice, lost his life out of respect for what France and the Legion does. And then my former teammates, I felt, hey, maybe it's up to me to write something that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's lots of bullshit out there. And it
like I say, when we were kids, I didn't come from a military background, but the French Foreign Legion it was always seemed kind of cool. It was like a cool thing because it did attract. The thing was it attracted all sorts of people.
Yeah, I know, and it does, and it still does, I think. But they can send them on their way pretty quick, right? There's a whole process. It takes a month from the day you show up to if you get accepted to go and do your basic training. It's about a month. They go through the gamut of, psychological evaluations, medical tests, background checks with Interpol, and other means, and then, interviews, physical fitness, and they pick and choose the guys that they feel will make the best Legionnaire soldier, So have you guys read the book?
I have not. I'm
okay.
I'm
Fair
one of these people where I just can't read. Is it on Audible?
I'll be out Audible next month.
Okay, I wasn't on Audible.
But one of my
reader. I'm not.
The reason I ask is because during basic training, one of the guys that I mentioned in the book is Benny Macdonald, and he was ex British military. Okay. Did a couple of tours, but he was from Inverness, he basically was the guy I would go through. Basic is 4 months long, but we're at for the first part of your basic training, you're at a farm for a month, and it's where they kind of teach you the discipline and the life of a Legionnaire, and it can be pretty rough. And me and Benny would just kind of hang out and talk shit, and he'd tell me stories about his time in the British military and in Ireland and stuff. And he had trouble with his knees. He was a sports monitor in the military, so he was in great shape. He had tats all, typical. Called him Jock, obviously, but he had tats on his arms, and he was a good shape, good soldier, but his knees were bugging him. And at the end of basic training, he decided to call it quits and go back to Scotland. But he was a good guy, man. And I mentioned him in the book for that reason. He was an interesting character.
Those military guys from the north of Scotland are as tough as old boots. It's a brutal existence up there.
Yeah. I always wonder what happened to him. Benny Macdonald was his real name. I always wonder. He's got to be around somewhere.
He will be around someplace.
Yeah. If you run into him anyway, let him know that.
It's not that. It's not that small a country, Joel. Jesus.
No, exactly. Yeah.
That's one of these things. That's a funny thing. That's a funny thing that people say to you when you're Scottish and you say, oh, do you know? I knew this guy once. He lived in fucking the other side of the country. Do you know him? You go, no, it's not that small.
I was hoping you guys were related. That's why I.
Jumped in the podcast.
Yeah, that's yeah. So the Legion was originally in North Africa. Is that right? Is that what they did? That's
right. Yeah,
controlled obviously like the French territories.
Yeah, exactly. So Indochina, present-day Vietnam. The French lost the war in Indochina at Dien Bien Phu, which is the famous end for them there. And then Algeria was a huge part of the Legion's history up until 62, 64. And there's a good book out there by a Englishman, Simon Murray, and he wrote the book Legionnaire. Simon Murray, he's actually our first guest on the podcast. He went on to create Orange Telecommunications, so he's done really well for himself. He got into and the eldest man to go to the South Pole unassisted. So he's quite the character. He's 80 now. Anyway, his book Legionnaire was kind of depicted his time in the airborne regiment of the Legion during the French-Algerian War, and that's actually what I read and got me interested in the Legion, because there wasn't a lot of information out there at the time, because it was pre-internet really. And yeah, after France gave Algeria their independence, the Rep and a lot of all the Legion regiments that were in North Africa, Algeria, they came to mainland France, and that's where most of them are based now. And yeah, as I said, it's a part of the French military, same rules, regulations. A lot of your courses you do with other French soldiers, and it's come a long way. And then the next good book to come out was Appel.
Yeah, it's
Getting it.
It's like I say, but you were from a military family, is that right?
Yeah, my dad was a fighter pilot in the Canadian Air Force.
Okay.
And so I grew up in Germany, and because the Canadians had two bases there, and then I spent a year in England, and then back to Canada, and then both my parents were Army, so Second World War. Okay. My dad's dad was a D-Day veteran, third wave, Juno Beach. My mom's dad retired a 2-star general. In fact, that's him behind me. Won the DSO. General Montgomery pinned the medal on his chest on the battlefield, and then he went to Buckingham Palace and had the medal was awarded to him by King George. So yeah, he was my hero growing up. And yeah, so the military was always in my DNA, I would think. And then growing up around it, it just felt like a natural progression after, hockey kind of came to an end. What did I want to do with myself? School wasn't an issue. I wasn't, that type of, and I always had this interest in jumping. And at the time in the Canadian military, early 90s, it was going through a tough time. The government, I won't get into details, but the government was, cutting subsidy and all that kind of stuff. And you couldn't get in as a reg force. Like a young man couldn't just join the Army and be a soldier. It wasn't an option. So I did the reserves for a while and got impatient. And I had heard about the Rep, which is the airborne regiment of the French Foreign Legion. And I looked into it. I wrote the Legion. They sent me back a letter with all the information on where you can join, some of the information on the regiments and all the information you would need at the time. And I said, excuse my French, fuck it, I'm going. And off I went with the sole purpose of getting to the Rep and jumping with the Deuxième Régiment Untitled Parachutiste, because I thought it just seemed neat to me, the idea that a foreigner can go and join a military and jump. So off I went, and I got to the Rep. And then I was fortunate enough, I did selection for their Pathfinders, which is like it's called the GCP, so Group Commando Parachutiste, which is the Pathfinder, similar to the British Pathfinders, but they also form what's called the GCP group. So in the French military, there's 9 French airborne regiments. One of them was the Legion, the Rep. And each of those regiments would have a GCP team. And together, they created the GCP group, which would support the French Special Operations Command. So as a GCP commando, you could either be supporting your regiment as a pathfinder, or you could be working with the group supporting the French Special Operations Command. So I did selection for that and then got in. And I was fortunate that, as a GCP team member, life was pretty laid back and good. We got good courses. We were, free fall qualified. So it was a 10-man Halo insertion team. And we would be off, doing stuff and kind of not really stuck in garrison, getting beasted on or doing the bullshit that you do when you're in garrison. So I had a fortunate and lucky career for that standpoint. And that kind of ties into, I felt, maybe no one thinks about writing. I mean, I certainly never anticipated writing a book in my life. That was not the objective when I was there. But looking back at it, I was lucky. I think being a Canadian in the French system, there's historical significance because obviously France and Canada have that historical connection. And then I was fortunate that my career was an interesting one in that I was able to get to the tip of the spear fairly quickly. And there was a narrative there. There was a good story. There was some, lessons learned. Like it's an honest description. I'm no G.I. Joe. I'm no Rambo. I made mistakes, as you do, all humans. Soldiering's not easy, especially, when you're thrown into the mix of it. Mm-hmm. Africa was new for me as a young Canadian. That was a life, a world apart. So I just kind of get into the lessons learned as a soldier and then talk about the truth behind the Legion, what I experienced, the other people I worked with. And so there you go. So it was just, to answer your question, I was always around the military and it seemed like a natural progression for me.
And obviously your time certainly predates the internet. So was it from the book Legionnaire, or was it just word of mouth that you heard about the Legion being in?
Yeah, well, it was,
come about?
You're right. A bit of both.
Okay.
I was doing my battle school in Wainwright, and there was an NCO on one of the other courses that had just come back. And the NCOs on my course knew that I was keen on getting into the airborne and jumping. And at that time, things weren't looking that positive for the Canadian Airborne Regiment. And history shows itself that they will eventually be disbanded for an incident that happened in Somalia. But as I mentioned, there was another NCO that had just come back, and the NCO would say, hey, if you want to jump, you can always go over to France, join the Legion, the REP, because that's the acronym that they use for the regiment, the REP. It's an option. And I was like, what? I was the same kind of thing, the French Foreign Legion. I'd heard about it, but I just assumed that was, movies and whatever. So I did my research. I tried to find as much information as I could, and the book Legionnaire was one of them. So I read that, and it was just a cool story from a cool individual about, a Legionnaire soldier in Algeria during the the Franco-Algerian War with the REP. So that was the first kind of thing where I was like, man, this is an option. I think I could do this. And truth be told, I'd been getting myself into a bit of trouble, young man with a loss of direction. I had done some stupid things, hung out with the wrong people. And I knew that I needed to make a change. I was raised in a good family. So I knew that, I wasn't on the right path. So I looked encyclopedias, best information I could find on the Legion in libraries. And there's a lot of old pictures of the REP jumping in Indochina, at Dien Bien Phu, that type of stuff. And then in Algeria, there's information about the regiments. And from there, I wrote the Legion. They came back with the information, and I was gone pretty quick. So it was basically, it was that, someone mentioning it to me, reading the book, and then doing as much research as I could. And then I was just like, you know what, man, I'm marking time here, wasting my time in Canada. I'm off, and off I went.
It's funny you should mention the movies in the Legion, because my friend that listens to the podcast, shout out to Lee Wallace, has been asking me for the last 3 weeks since I announced that we were getting you on. He's like, you need to ask him, is the bit that played by, I think Jean Reno plays a Legionnaire in Godzilla. And he was like, ask him if he's Godzilla. And I was like, so that's what I've now asked the question. You don't have to answer it, Joel, but I've asked the question just because my mate's been bugging me for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Ask
honestly,
him
I can't. I honestly can't comment and say that I recall that role. But Jean-Claude Van Damme nails it in the movie Legionnaire. No,
okay.
He doesn't. He doesn't. I'm kidding. There's no proper representation of a Legionnaire. And that's the Legionnaire is so much Hollywood. You know, you get these anyway. Yeah, what to say?
I suppose the Legionnaire to use like Braveheart to us, 100% accurate.
Yeah, there you go. Possibly, yeah.
The Jean Reno, the character in Godzilla will be like Mel Gibson being Braveheart to us. That's what would be the same thing.
Yeah.
I can't believe you asked a question about Godzilla.
It's been bugging me for weeks. When's the Legion guy on? Remember and ask him. When's the Legion guy on? Remember every other week's been asking.
That's funny. I always remember from. Do you guys remember the movie? What was it? The Wedding? No, it wasn't The Wedding Singer. It was The Wedding Crashers.
Yeah.
Remember? And they're going. What's the actor's name? But he's dancing with a hot chick. They're at these weddings where they're trying to pick up girls. You know, they sneak into weddings, and he's giving this girl a sob story, and she's like, "What's wrong?" He's like, "You know, I was in the French Foreign Legion. We lost a lot of good." And I remember watching the movie, and I just laughed. Man, I was just, you know,
Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, Vince Vaughn. That's right. Yeah, I thought I laughed, man, when I heard that. That was funny.
There you go.
Yeah,
Oh,
I try to use that as much as I can.
It's funny how it's funny how Hollywood can impact people's thought thought process. You know, when people talked about what was the one with Ben Stiller? Oh my God, Pearl Harbor. You know, when Ben Stiller basically wins the Battle of Britain. Ben Affleck. Ben Stiller. When Ben Affleck basically wins the Battle of Britain on his own, and people think that that was real. It's funny how these Hollywood depictions have their influence on people. But yeah,
have you guys watched? You must have seen Black Hawk Down.
Oh yeah.
So I had.
It's really good as well.
Yeah, the book is really good. Yeah, I was blown, but. I've watched that movie too many times, but and then I as a helicopter pilot I see the error in the ways, and I feel sad for the guys that took the RPGs and the tail rotor. But we had the episode before the last on ours, we had Tom and his wife Jen Satterley, and Tom was a Delta operator, and that was his first. He was a Black Hawk Down veteran, and he suffered from the effects of it, and we don't really get into the movie too much because he couldn't watch the movie because it's different, right? For a veteran, as he says, he has the visions in his mind. So, but yeah, it's interesting. Trying to make my point is, we watch movies and they're entertainment, but for a gentleman like Tom, it's reality, and it's not quite the same. I asked him on that because have you guys seen 1917?
Not yet. No.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I saw it. If you can't see it on the big screen though, it's probably tough now, but it was really well done. But I asked Tom, I said, if there are any good movies out there, military movies that kind of try to show it in the right way, what would you? And he kind of agreed to that, Saving Private Ryan, where they come out of the boats on the D-Day. That was probably he mentioned that when he went and saw it, he walked out at that point. It was too real for him. And I was, quite respectful of that truth being talked. But it's, like you say, man, movies it's just Hollywood bullshit, right? Where they try to make it entertainment and it just doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. So I did, reasonably well as an amateur boxer, Joel. So it was like watching, watching the Rocky films. When people talk about the Rocky films, and you go, "But people, that's amazing." Listen, that somebody would die a minute into that. It's impossible.
Yeah.
This would never happen. This is how a boxing match goes. It's just less extreme, but it's the same idea. Of course, it has to be made more exciting. But
exactly.
But yeah, were you ever in Somalia?
I wasn't. No, the regiment I was with in the Legion, they were, but that was just before my time. Yeah. I joined. I was in '94 to 2000.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It just seems like one of those places. It's just. Even now, just with the pirates and everything, just extreme poverty and crazy
it's a
crimes.
tough environment, and history repeats itself. It's just one of those.
Yeah. It's So, what one of the things that I just lost my thought. This is one of the things about podcasts you can't make up. I just lost my train of thought there.
Or it's the boxing. Or it's the boxing.
Might be one of the two. It might be one of the, I've been hitting the head a lot. I have no idea what I was going to say.
What about jumping into Algeria, Joe? I've got friends that have been out to, not Algeria itself, but to Morocco, which obviously isn't a million miles away. And they always talk about Morocco being like very, very poverty-stricken and a real, just almost like a different world to growing up in a Western country, obviously Britain versus. Did you find similar, because you were saying coming from, I wouldn't imagine there's much ice hockey in Algeria to put.
No.
Was that a big culture shock going across for the first time as a young man?
It was, and as I mentioned in the book, is my first introduction to Africa is when I go into Bangui, Central Africa, and that's my first taste of Africa combat, working as a soldier in the Legion, and then a teammate or a team member of the GCB. So it was a huge culture shock for me. My head was on a swivel. So not only was I seeing a poverty or a lifestyle that I couldn't really fathom or differed from what I had experienced, but I was also seeing the worst of humanity, and then also trying to do my job that I've been trained to do, but never had the opportunity to do it for real. So it was quite the experience. And then moving on, we did Chad, which is southern Sahara, so it's a different type of geography, land, and a different level of poverty. But something I mentioned in the book is, we would go through these towns that had nothing but little huts. Their livestock would live with them. They were barely clothed, but they were happy. They were smiles on their faces, happy to see you, just getting on with life. But, you come back to North America and we have, our nice SUV, we got our Wi-Fi, we got our Starbucks coffee, and people are always grumpy, and you know what I mean? So that's something that stuck with me, is that, I was fortunate as a young Canadian that I have all these opportunities in life, but it's what you do with them. And it doesn't necessarily make, having things doesn't necessarily make you happy. Here are people that have nothing, but they just have themselves, their family, they're surviving, but they're happy. So that's something that stuck with me. And then I did Brazzaville, Congo on 2 occasions, which was, there was a civil war going on. Again, different type of geography, different people, different setting. That was interesting to see the level of destruction that the Civil War can do, how little life means to certain parts of the world. Just people, civilians, just being caught in the crossfire and killed. Like, it's just not a big, it's not a big deal, but it happens. And then I worked in Algeria as a civilian, supporting oil and gas efforts after my career in the Legion, and I've spent probably on and off around 8 years in Algeria, different parts of the country. And to be honest with you, I was quite taken with it. There's a lot of history there. Obviously, the French military connection, certainly the Legion was interesting to me, but a lot of the architecture in the towns is old French architecture. You see a lot of similarities to Paris and downtown cores. So and then obviously the Romans were in Algeria. That was a huge part of a lot of their wheat came from North Africa. And so there's a lot of history there, which I love. I'm a history buff. I love seeing old shit. Castles were something that I was enamored with as a kid. So I dig the historical side of things. And then I did a couple years as a security operator in Iraq. I did a year in Afghanistan. Same thing. Seeing countries and history I've read so much about, but then seeing that history repeating itself to a certain extent, and then seeing the worst of humanity and then the best of humanity, has always been a learning experience. And something I try to take from. But it's as a young Canadian, and then just as a Canadian in general, we're very fortunate as you are in Scotland. We have our freedoms. We have, you have that. You're sick, you go to the hospital, you get help. You're hungry, you go to the grocery store, you want a beer, you go to the liquor store, you get a beer, whatever. You know what I mean? You drive to see your parents, and a lot of people don't have that. And sometimes I have to check myself because I get pissed. Like this morning, I was like cursing out my Wi-Fi, like, what the fuck, my Wi-Fi shit. It's like, but it could be worse. I could be getting mortared or firebombed in Syria, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I suppose people get that. Talking a little bit of history, and again, I might butcher this, but I remember something that my dad told me, and again, this could be another one of these Legion myths potentially. But I remember a story about one of and you're going back to the early days potentially. Yeah. But an officer in a wooden hand, being like a relic.
Yeah. So that's Capitaine d'Anjou. So that's early. I couldn't give you the date, but it's when they were in Mexico. And it was the Battle of Cameroon, which is kind of the revered battle that the Legion celebrates every year. And what it was is they were surrounded by Mexicans, and their convoy had been decimated, cut down, and he was killed. Captain d'Anjou was killed in the battle, and the Mexicans gave the Legionnaires the opportunity to give up, and they didn't. And there's a couple of stories, but they charged the Legionnaires, and at the end, I believe there were 6 that survived, and the Mexican officer in charge said, these are devils. I don't want to massacre the history of it, but it's definitely an important part of the Legion's history, and that wooden hand is now in the museum in Aubing, which is the Legion's main headquarters, the Premier. So it's in the museum there in a nice box, and that kind of stands for the Legion ethos. You kind of fight to the end, which is whatever. Yeah, it's a bit dramatic, but they use it to their advantage. Yeah.
I love those. I love those tales. I love those stories. I like like yourself, Joel. I'm a little bit of a history nerd, and I love those old tales, and listen to all these combat stories and stuff.
I didn't realise it was Mexico. I would have put money on it being like Chad or Congo or something. I did not realise it was Mexico.
Mexico.
Nothing about time would have
Why would the Legion have been in Mexico? Why would they have been in that region?
Well, you guys are putting me on the spot. I don't. France was. These are early days when early days for the American continent. So France obviously had its interests throughout.
Right. Yeah.
But they were that convoy in particular was transporting funds. It was gold or money, but whatever. But France. They're always.
I suppose that could have been, if it was as long ago as that, Mexico went further up into what's now America. So it might not. It makes sense.
It wasn't. So, remember we were talking about not coming across like idiots. Well, there you go. I've just. If we can edit. Let's edit that out.
I had a complete brain fart, so that's fine. That's fine. Now, Ali's asked about Godzilla. I forgot what I'm talking about, and then you're not sure today. So there we go. Yeah. We've completed the trio. Exactly.
We're humans. So it's all good.
Absolutely. You know what? And that, kind of going back to what was, early on, just talking to people, as you realise. So even, talking to, somebody in the French Foreign Legion, somebody who was in the Navy SEALs, somebody who was in FBI. You realise, you kind of have these images in your head of what these people are like, and then you speak to them and you go, he's just a guy. He's just a normal person. He's not what I thought in my head. So it's really interesting. But so what's going on in life now, Joe? What's the plans moving forward?
I got out in 2000, and we used to spend a lot of time in helicopters, so I kind of got the itch to fly. So I got out and did my flight training in Canada in 2000. And I've been flying helicopters commercially on and off since. So summers, like right now, it's our fire season. And then winters, last 4 years, I've been doing the heli skiing stuff. And that keeps me obviously busy with employment and doing something that that I do enjoy. Like, it's always a challenge. You never master a helicopter. It's always checking you, you know. And certainly the type of flying that we do, it's challenging. So that kind of keeps that adventurous and challenging side checked off in my requirements, I guess. I have 2 kids. I have a son and a daughter, Carter and Kyle, who son's 14, Kyle's 12. So, you know, being a dad is a huge part. So I juggle life, being a dad, and the challenges that come with that. And I'm partners in a risk mitigation company. So 2 of my friends from the military, we got together after years of supporting other efforts and started our own kind of risk mitigation company. And we support mostly domestically stuff, but we do some international stuff. It's health and safety based, but you know, we support clients that need, you know, help in certain areas that might be challenging to them, that typically they can't source the right type of people to do it or have the knowledge or experience. And more recently with the book came out in March 2019, and you know, I hadn't really thought about post-book, right? And when you publish or get a book published, a lot of the marketing comes down on the author to get it out there and you know, and sell the book. So it's kind of pointless to put all that time and effort and not. So I got into the whole social media stuff. We mentioned the Jocko thing. That was kind of the start to it. But I wanted to kind of find a way that the book's not about me. And long story short, I had been invited to the regiment that I served in the reserves, the Royal Westminster Regiment. I had been invited by their RSM, who's a friend from when I was in, to their senior NCO dinner. And I went, and then post-traumatic stress was something that was mentioned a lot. And I was sitting beside the NCO, or sorry, the CO, the commanding officer, and he told me that, you know, after their tour in Afghanistan, they've had a couple of suicides. And I just thought, you know, shit, it's just the more I read, the more I hear about PTSD. And it's just something I don't know enough about, but I find it heartbreaking that we send our young men and women off to do these jobs. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of them, and the numbers are astronomical, the more I hear, the more I'm gutted, to be honest with you, that for them, a lot of them, the solution is to take their life, you know? And unfortunately, it sucks for them, but the people around them, they're the ones that suffer, right? For the, you know, the one that's, so I had started Legion Engineered, which was kind of a side effort from the company I'm partners in. I kind of felt that it would be nice if we had something that was doing its part to help a cause, which is something that we had been a part of, but to help today's men and women that are out there suffering. And they don't necessarily have to be soldiers, just anyone that's out there doing the thing that are suffering. So I started Legion Engineered, and it's basically just an apparel line. All the proceeds will go to support PTSD awareness. And then the book, same thing. The royalties that come to me as the author, albeit they're not very much, but that goes to Legion Engineered to support its efforts. And then part of that was, you guys mentioned, you know, the podcast, the System D podcast, which is a term that comes from the book. System D is kind of a term used in the Legion just to figure shit out. So if plan A, plan B, and C don't work, D just means whatever options you have, fucking figure it out. And that's life, right? We all experience that. So I thought, you know what, why don't we, you know, I've been like you guys watching podcasts. It's interesting. I like it that you get to see the real person. And I thought, why not, instead of being asked the questions, I got lots of questions for people that I think are cool out there, you know, and I could maybe learn from. So I said, let's start the System D podcast, which is a part of the Legion Engineered effort. We get guests on. Doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, post-traumatic stress related, but just anyone out there that might have good life knowledge, skills, lessons that will be helpful to anyone. Let's get out there and do that. So that's been, you know, Legion Engineered set up. The website's there, www.legionengineer.com. It's, you know, online. Ships. If you buy something, be patient. Right now with COVID, it takes a while to get to you, but all the money goes to help PTSD awareness. At this point, it's, you know, it's setting up everything. But and then the podcast gives me that opportunity to go out and ask cool people that I'm interested in, if they would be interested in coming on, and then asking them questions that I think are valid and I'm interested in, you know. So that's been taken up my time. And to be honest with you, it takes up all my time. You know, sometimes I'm running
Busy
around
guy.
like but
Yeah.
and you know, you make mistakes as a result, but I think the hard work's paid off. Legion Engineered, it's there. It's slowly gaining, you know, that the following where it can be anyone from any country, soldier, civilian, whatever, if they have family or friends or they want to help. You know, I think we all have friends out there that have suffered. It's a way to maybe try to bring it all together. It's not, you know, a Canadian company. It's not a French company. It's, you know, because, you know, Legion Engineered being that our backgrounds are from the Legion. So we worked with a multinational background, right? I worked with, you know, every nationality out there. So, and the interesting is we came together and we were able to work together as one cohesive group, right? Nationality, beliefs, upbringings aside, we're all human beings. So that was kind of the gist of that. And then, the System D, I can reach out and talk to guys like Simon Murray. You know, that was an honor. He was, you know, having read his book all those years ago, it was cool, man. That was, and then we had Sean Evangelista, who's an ex-SEAL development group. He started 30 Seconds Out, which is an apparel company in the States that does quite well. And I always liked his stuff. You know, I had his shirts and his hats, and I thought his style and his efforts were cool. So I kind of Legion Engineered, as I told Sean, I didn't copy, but he definitely was an influence. You know, I saw his stuff. I was like, you know what, that's neat. I think I could, you know, try to do my own thing and then obviously, as I mentioned, you know, having watched Black Hawk Down too many times, on the PTSD side, I read Tom Satterley's book. It's called All Secure. And he basically talks about the facts of, you know, what being a witness to those type of events and that life can have on people. And, you know, we've watched the movie. It looks cool, but he was there. It wasn't cool, and he suffered. And his book was it was an excellent read. I suggest it to anyone, but it's a hard read. It's you know, it's tough, man. And so to have him on and ask him about his experiences and then share that type of thing, that was cool. And then so that, you know, that's the objective, get some more interesting people on and just crack on and see where it goes. I'm sure, like you guys, it's from day one, your first podcast, whereas now these things just kind of find its own path, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm hoping that happens.
Yeah, one of the things I'm happy to say, Joel, is right before we went on, I ordered one of your T-shirts from Legion Engineered.
Oh, you did? I appreciate that.
I
awesome.
did. So
Thank you.
I ordered the black, the para one. Is that you? The soldier in front of the helicopter with the blacked out eyes. Is that?
It is. Yeah.
Is that you?
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So I've got I ordered. What was the
Appreciate
little it's cool. So a couple of the guys that had been on before had some a parallel stuff, you know, T-shirts and all this. But Jocko, actually one of them, who I really wanted to order one of his T-shirts.
Yeah.
But they were $27 for the T-shirt and then $50 to ship it, and I went, whereas yours was like $5 to ship it, and I went, oh, that seems way more reasonable. So
we're lucky. I appreciate that.
Ordered one of those. It's a really cool T-shirt, so I'll be sure and tag you in that when I'm nice and sweaty doing a workout. So
that'd be awesome. Send that. I'll post that. If you can send me a good picture. I'll post it with your guys' podcast tagged. And I'll do what I can, because that's awesome. Yeah, we have a warehouse in Latvia, so that's why it can ship from Europe.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I would love to buy one of your. If you can sign a book for me, I'll buy one of your books as well.
Sure. Yeah. No. Too easy.
I'll send you. I'll send you a message later on, and
cool.
That'd be cool. It's a nice thing to have, I think, and I'll try my best to read. I'm not a good reader, but
it's.
I'll try my best. But it's you know, it's an interesting old life. All these twists and turns that everything takes.
Yeah.
You know, like you're saying, when you were in the Legion, you didn't ever think you would write a book. You know, it's amazing the road that life takes you on. Yeah. You have to, you know, like you're saying, you went to, you know, you're raised to the top quite quickly. But I don't think those things are by accident at all. I think you find these little paths in life, and you get to where you're meant to be.
Yeah,
I don't, I don't think it's any coincidence that you got to the top quite quickly in the Legion.
Appreciate it.
I don't think it's any coincidence now. You're doing well with books, and you're helping all these people. I think you find your path in life.
Yeah.
100%. So yeah, it's pretty
appreciate
cool.
that. I appreciate it, and I try to say that to my kids and stuff, or anyone that asks, just go after what you want to go after. If you believe in something and you feel it in your gut, your heart, just don't listen to people, because everyone's going to say, no, that's going to be too hard, or that's tough. It's better to regret something you have done than to regret something you haven't done, right? So just go after it. At least you can look yourself in the mirror and said, I tried. And that's, I appreciate what you said about the Legion, but I was keen. I wanted to soldier, and I put in the time and effort. And as a result, it got me to where I wanted to be, So I think that's true in life. If you put in the effort, you're going to get to where you should be.
Yeah.
Do you think
sorry, Ali.
Sorry, do you think your kids will look military, Joe? Continue in the family train?
No.
I've got 2 teenage sons and a daughter. My sons are 16, 17, and they're now looking potentially at the military. Because my dad was Navy, my granddad was 28 years in the Royal Marines during the Second World War and after.
Yeah.
My knees fell apart and I never made it into the Marines, unfortunately, talking about Scottish guys with bad knees. But do you think kids will follow in your footsteps or in your family's footsteps, and are they looking at the military?
I don't know, obviously. The 14 and 12. My son, I doubt it. I think he's a little smarter than. Not that's wrong. He's smarter than I am, but I don't think that's really something that he's interested in. He's more into the IT side of stuff. Who knows where it'll go? I mean, 14's still young. Yeah. If they did, I'll be obviously a proud parent and support whatever choice they make. My daughter, I don't know what her plans are, but yeah, if they do, hats off to them. I'll support their efforts and be a proud parent. But as long as they do what they want to do in life and they're happy, that's key, right? Is waking up every morning and doing what you want to be doing. Yeah.
Do you think there would be any, talking about your kids, Joe, do you think there would be any, as they get a little bit older towards kind of, adulthood, do you think there would be any pressure on them looking at the family history, the family tree, everybody being military, or do you think there'll be...
I don't think so. No, I don't think so, because on their mom's side, they, it's more of a worker. There's no military first, or on the first. I think their mom's father's grandfather was obviously, like most of ours, served in the Second World War, but nothing recent. So they're more, a blue collar type, work hard, and do that. So they don't really. Yeah, it's hard to say, but there's definitely no pressure. They don't. There's not a ton of interest. They know that, history, and I'm into this kind of stuff, and they kind of pick up on that by osmosis or whatever, but they're not, jumping at the bit to read my book or that kind of stuff. So they could care less, to be honest with you, which is cool. It's fine. But yeah, definitely no pressure. Yeah, not at all.
Sounds like every kid in the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's funny because I think to some extent, even me, my uncle was in the army and stuff, but I think every little boy, I don't know, you had them in Canada, was those, the little green soldiers they used to play with, and used to draw tanks and stuff. I think every little boy at some point wanted to be a soldier.
I still have them. I was playing with them earlier. Here's a short story. I tried to have my son sit with me, and we watched Band of Brothers, which is, a classic, right? And he wouldn't have it. He was, like, it was torture, and I unfortunately got bent out of shape and took offense to that. But whatever, you learn, right? I was like, how dare you not? But I took him to 1917 on the IMAX screen. I went and saw it, and I was like, this is a good film. It doesn't, they've done a good job. So I said, hey, come watch this movie with me, because the youngest soldier to pay the ultimate sacrifice in the First World War in the trenches in France was a young Irish soldier, and he was 14. He lied about his age. So that's my son's age, right? So we went, and there was a scene where they're in the trenches. The officers are there on the upper end of the trench with the whistles. The artillery barrage is going through, and they're just waiting to go over the top, and you see the faces of And that's what they did good about the movie is the kids, they're just kids, right? They're 17, 16, 18, waiting to go over the top, and they know they're going to get mowed down, right? And you can just see it in their faces, and the officer's like, steady, because they're just chomping at the bit. And my son was like, and I was like, I said to him, some of those kids are your age, man. He's like, really? I was like, yeah, fucking really. We all, yeah. So it was, it's a good movie. Go see it. But I kind of lost.
Yeah,
Did that answer the question? Yeah, it was just a good movie. So, there you go.
You're asking the wrong person. I can't remember what fucking day it is.
Yeah.
So I have no
There you
idea. I think it's on. I think you can buy it or rent it now on Apple TV. So
the question was, do for 14-year-old boys and playing with army stuff? I don't think so much anymore. I think it's now they're playing. Well, they're playing Call of Duty. Yeah, they're right in there. Right?
Yeah. Exactly. It seems that just seems crazy to me. I don't have any kids, but I've got a niece and a nephew, and they're 2 and 8, and it seems insane the technology from when I was a kid to now. Like I say, I would quite regularly when I was younger. This probably says a lot about me. It was just dig a hole. and fill it with water. Like I would just dig holes. Like, this is cool. Like, I could put water in and the water drains away. But now they've got VR goggles and stuff on. And you're like, what the fuck? That's crazy, isn't it? But like you're saying, I had plastic toys and used to draw tanks, and now they have Call of Duty and all these crazy things.
Oh, you're right.
It's amazing.
It's a different era, and there's phones, social media. Like they're just so much more aware and introduced to things and switched on. It's hard to fathom.
One of the funny things that I trying to explain this to younger, even just younger teenagers is back when so I'm 35, Ali's 42.
42.
So even when I was a kid, you could bullshit. You could really bullshit somebody because how did you check it? How did you check everything? Well, you have to go to the library. And, you're gonna have to check out 3 or 4 books. But now you just go, wait, you're who? Let me check.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, you're not. It's so hard to bullshit kids now.
I'm thinking more when you're 13, 14, what you can see on your phone.
Well,
It was as a parent of 2 teenage boys, it was a different discussion to the chat my dad had with me when I was a teenage boy about some of the things. Do you know what I mean? Like, do not send dick pics.
or be careful before you do. Yeah.
Who you send them to?
You have to crop it properly.
You have to crop it.
Whole different discussion.
Man.
Don't send them a filter.
What a time to be alive, huh? What a time to be alive. How are we doing for time, Ali? I don't have a watch on.
Just over there. Are you still good, Joe?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. It's been fun. So, just trying to think. There's stuff that I wanted to ask you. Because I listened to the Jocko podcast this morning, there was that I was working, but I was listening to things in my head to ask you, and I've now again forgotten about them. But try to think. Well, there's something I wanted to ask you, and I've bloody forgotten again. It'll come back to me.
It'll
come back to me.
I wish I could go back and run that one through again, but whatever. I think in the end it was
productive.
It was good. I mean, I have no regrets. And it introduced me to a whole different spectrum of things. Hence here we are. But it was. He's an interesting guy. He's definitely, like you said, he's the setting is intense, intimidating, and it's the room is exactly like it was a lot smaller than I had anticipated. Like you walk in and it's quite small, which makes sense for sound but it's all black, and then they got the mics there. He's got his knives, and and then
even Echo's a big dude, isn't he? Echo looks a big dude when you see him in pictures.
He actually, when I was walking up to I got there early, and I sat on a bench across the street watching the gym, and I walk over about 30 minutes before I was supposed to be there, and Echo was actually getting out of his car. So I walked up, I was, hey, Echo, I'm Joel, I'm going to be the guest. And so he kind of, we introduced himself, and then he walked me through the gym, and then brought me up to the podcast room. But yeah, nice guy. He'd actually grown up in Canada for a while. Him and his brother, and then they moved to Hawaii. So, but yeah, he was a nice guy. He kind of got me through through the gym and up into the podcast room, and then briefed me briefly on it. And then Jocko showed up, and then we shot the shit for about 15 minutes, and then just got straight into it, And then once it was done, they basically just gave me a t-shirt and said, "Get the fuck out." But because they're busy, right? But yeah, whatever. I'm kidding. But it was all business, but it was it was definitely a learning experience.
Good.
Yeah.
And
That's
outstanding exposure as well, because as you say,
Yeah.
probably, and this isn't any offence meant in any way, shape, or form, but probably very few people knew about you.
No,
Up until-
no one did. Yeah.
Obviously, I hadn't
Yeah.
heard of you until the
Yeah.
Jocko podcast and introduced you to sort of into my world, and that's
Yeah.
kind of where I started following you. And from early days of the podcast with me and Chris, we kind of put together an ideal guest list, and your name was right up there at the top. Where once we got
Appreciate
through
that.
our friends, because like everything, like kind of you were saying with your podcast, Joe, you try and get people on that, number one, are interesting, but number two, also that you're comfortable talking with or to.
Yeah.
So our first few episodes, if you go back and watch them, it's just me and Chris and a few of our mates that have done some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And then very quickly we're like, do you know what? Let's just start getting people. What's the worst that happens? If I'd reached out to yourself, if you'd said no or ignored the message, well, that's okay.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. I've had. 100%. I'm definitely appreciative and respect the opportunity that Jocko gave me, and I've certainly voiced that. It was huge, and much appreciated. It was kind of surreal. I got the I don't know if I don't know if he mentions it on there, but I had sent him a book. Someone had said to me, you should send. So I sent him a book, and then I just kind of same thing. I just thought I would never hear back, And then it came a card in the mail from him and said, "Hey, if you're interested in discussing the book on my podcast, let me know." And I was like, "Fuck yeah," I'm definitely interested. Yeah. So it was, it was like you say, it was a huge opportunity, and kind of got the ball rolling. And then just you kind of get, you see a new environment, and then you spend a little more time watching other podcasts, kind of seeing what you like, the style that you like.
Yeah.
And then I also found, because I did that, a handful afterwards, you start to get a feel of the questions can become, depends on the length, but the short ones, the questions are very similar all the time, right? And then you would start seeing in yourself, you're answering just kind of like a robot, right? It's the same answer. And I would see that in watching other podcast guests. You could see if they were interested or they weren't interested. You know what I mean? They're just either going through the motions or they're having a good talk. And obviously, when they're having a good talk, it's interesting because you see the real person, not just an answer blurted out that they've said a million times. And I think as you guys are doing, that's the effort, is just to have a good talk and get a good sense of the person and see where it goes. So I try to do the same, but it's interesting. It's
one of the things that people have asked us before is how do you structure it? How do you write how do you script it? And we go, no, we don't.
Yeah.
And this that just shows you, because twice there I had absolute brain farts and forgot what I was going to say, because I don't script anything. It's just like we have ideas in our head of things that we want to talk about, and then because I think if you say so when did you join the Legion, Joel, and how was it? Did you meet any good people? It's just it's shit. Who wants that's just boring. So
we always said when we launched the podcast, in an ideal world, we wanted it to sound like three mates having a drink.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be an interview, because if you want to get an interview, there's far better interviewers than me and Chris out there. Do you know?
Yeah, I get it. I'm the same. Yeah. Yeah. Or the information's out there. If there's a book or whatever, you just, why repeat the same stuff? Go read you can find out the information. I agree with you 100%.
I remember what I was going to say the second time now. I was going to ask you. You did a little bit of judo.
Yeah, but it was short. Didn't. It was actually when I was in England. Started in Germany, and then England. There was a school at Bracknell, and I think that's where it kind of ended. Because we went back to Canada, and then I was all about hockey. So I didn't really have much. There wasn't a lot of martial arts kind of stuff. And then obviously when I got into the Legion, they had the French military hand-to-hand combat system that they train. So that would have been probably the extent of it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Really
so, yeah, I would, yeah, whatever. I didn't. Wish I had done more, but I hadn't. It's life. You kind of stick to the stuff that you're
yeah, but that's exactly
right?
exactly what I was saying before. Everything finds its rhythm and its reason, and you find your little pass. And if you were supposed to, me, the way that I got into jiu-jitsu was hilarious. And now that I look back, you're going, that's just something that was meant to happen. Now that I look back at the whole thing, you go, fuck, man. This was just like, this was supposed to happen on this day. I was supposed to do. Jiu-jitsu and the way it happened. So it's one of those things. It's super fun. If you ever want to do it, if you ever want to learn a martial art, Joel, I would say
go for it. Yeah. To be honest, I hear. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's a popular subject matter these days. I said to my son, actually, he should, because I got a punching bag in my gym or in my garage, and I work the bag for a workout, and I always bring. I taught him as I could as a young boy how to at least throw a good jab cross, a good, at least if he's at school and that bully wants to, because I experienced that, right? And if the only thing that works, the only language that works with a bully is, a good left or a right. They don't. Yeah. So I said, at least learn how to protect yourself or your friends. And you're getting at an age where that's just going to happen. Boys will be boys, and he doesn't. He wasn't really. But he can throw a good punch. But I'd said to him recently, why don't you get into jiu-jitsu? Because it's a great, just for yourself, for everything. And if you do, I would come along with you when I can. But he was like, you know what, Dad, shut up. So whatever.
It's funny.
What do I know? So.
Yeah, my oldest son trained jiu-jitsu, and it happened almost like you were saying. He'd struggled for a little bit, like a lot of teenagers do with mental health and pressures of being a teenager. And I've been saying we need to get you into something, get you out your head as much, get you a little bit more physical. Yeah. And we had played about with jiu-jitsu years back because I used to train with a couple of guys. And literally that night on Facebook, I'd kind of said to Aaron, what about jiu-jitsu? You used to quite enjoy it when you were younger. And he was like, if there's anything. And literally that evening, one of my mates posted starting jiu-jitsu at a gym just down the road from me, and that's where me and Chris trained. Yeah. And then and a couple of people know this story, but just before the schools broke up, Aaron actually had to use his jiu-jitsu at school and choked a kid unconscious in the middle of the schoolyard because an ex-pupil came back onto the grounds, and all the rumours were he had a knife and he was going to stab one of his friends. And Aaron said he saw the ex-pupil pushed his friend over and just dropped onto him. And Aaron said, I didn't know if he had a knife or not. So I thought, well, he's got his back exposed, rear naked choke. And he says he just pulled him off. And Aaron's quite academic and very quiet. And as he stood up, obviously when teenagers fight, there's that scrum of kids. Melee, and Aaron just stood up and rolled the guy into the recovery position. And everyone was just like...
Good for him.
How? And he's like, I've been training just for years. But like, that's me. Do you know what I mean? Like, growing up.
That's awesome. That's a good story. Good for him. Hats off to Adam. Yeah, nice one. We'll see. I keep throwing it out there. But you can't drag these kids these days. I have my challenges as a father of my son. I think the more you treat them as a young soldier, whatever, the less it works. So I'm kind of trying to figure that out. I just like, you know what, you got to do what you got to do, but whatever, I'll support whatever it is.
I see this. When my sister or brother-in-law are shouting at me at my nephew because he's 8 and he's starting to get a little bit cheeky and a little bit, she'll shout at him to not do things. And like, you don't understand. If you shout at him and tell him not to do something,
he's going to do it.
Just going to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that doesn't work with a young boy. He's going to do just whatever you say, he will do. Because that's how little boys work.
Yeah. Exactly.
However, says the non-parent.
Easy for me. See what I do, and what I did before I came up to do this was, they were down at my mum and dad's house, and I go in and I wrestle with them and get them all wild and get them all hyper and they run about and then go, okay, I'm going to go. Bye-bye. Deal with those things.
Awesome.
But that's fun.
Well, that's a good influence. That's a good influence for them to see, because they'll take interest in what you do, and
Yeah.
that might be their route to jiu-jitsu down the road. It's all what you're surrounded with, right? And
This is why I think it's super important for any kid to have a strong male presence, a positive male presence in the house. It's so they know that Uncle Chris is crazy. He runs up hills and swims in lochs and all this kind of stuff. So hopefully it rubs off on them a little bit. How many parents do you see that are overweight and don't do anything?
That's true.
That's what the kids are going to become, isn't it? So
monkey see, monkey do, right? That's
exactly. Exactly. So did you do any skiing? Because you're in Canada.
Yeah.
Did you do skiing?
Yeah. So there was a big part of my upbringing, because I grew up in Germany, and my dad he flew the 104. He was a fighter pilot. So I spent 8 years in Germany as a young kid. So we would go to France every winter and ski in the Alps. The French, we went Val d'Isère mostly.
Okay.
And we would do a couple times. We went to Austria, Switzerland, St. Moritz, and but what they had was the French and the Canadian military had an exchange program where we would go to Val d'Isère in the Alps, and there would be like a ski school run for the French pilots and the Canadian pilots. So that was kind of my introduction, and then to the French ski instructors, because they were military. And then in the book, when I get into the rep in the first company, we go and do our commando course in the mountains, and it's the similar type regiment. And then I do my mountain warfare course with the second company, which is the mountain company in the rep. And I do my because I could ski well, because I always skied. I did my mountain high alpine Pathfinder course, and it put me in a good standing in the team, because I had the ability and the skills on the hills, So, and I ski to this day. And on our time off, when I was in the Legion, on our time off, we'd go to Ting all the time. I was snowboarding at the time, but I had a longboard. I was into the kind of the freestyle stuff. But I'd go when I could. I'd go to Ting, and I love the Alps. And I ski. I ski now when I can. My kids are good skiers. I have a lot of time for skiing. And then I fly the heli skiing, in the wintertime. Unfortunately, I don't get to enjoy it. I just get to make sure that they get up to the top without scaring everyone. But maybe one day I'll get in the back.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of skiing in Scotland, but if you've skied in the Alps, I've been 3 times to the Alps to ski. So I've been to Val d'Isère.
Nice,
and I've been to Chamonix twice to ski. Yeah, so that way this little cup is from Chamonix. So skied there twice. That's where I would move if I won the lottery. I would I'd have a place in Chamonix, because you can climb hills all summer and ski. I'm a terrible skier, but I can get down a slope nice and slowly. Cool. So we have some skiing in Scotland, but it's quite shit. It's not. It's okay, but it's not great.
Fair enough, It's hard. It's hard to compete with the Alps. It's
amazing.
It's just it is what it is.
I've said this a few times to people that have been on the podcast. I say if Chamonix is an amazing place. It doesn't look real. So I've got pictures from. I've done the marathon and Mont Blanc marathon as well, and I have pictures on my phone. It doesn't look like a real place. You go, fuck. It just looks. It's an insane place.
Like
I love
poster.
It does. It's amazing. So it's super cool. So I'm now starting to get to the point, Ali, where I'm running out of things to talk about. My brain.
Just heading into the hour 20 anyway.
I know my brain when it gets to about an hour 15. I start going.
I
wish I was smarter.
Just before we wrap all up, Joe, I know you mentioned it a few times during the podcast, but do you want to let people know where they can find out more about you and all your Legion engineered stuff, and we'll put it in the notes as well on the podcast?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. The book, I guess, Appel, it's on Amazon, ebook, Kindle, iTunes, Google Play, Kobo. The Audible audiobook will be out in July, and then Legion Engineered. at www.legionengineer.com. It's obviously online. There is a link there for the book too, as it, obviously the sales will help that cause. And then, if you want to kind of help, not necessarily help the cause, but, talk to or listen to some of the guests that we have that are kind of in connection to that, it's at the System D podcast, which is, there's the Facebook page, and then, SoundCloud, all that kind of stuff, similar type effort to what you guys are doing. So I appreciate this opportunity, and it was cool talking to you. And I wish you guys luck on your efforts, and good for you, man. Keep it up. Yeah. It's been good.
And you. Cool.
Appreciate it.
Episode 24 in the can. Joe Struthers, thanks again for taking the time to join us this evening.
Thanks, gents. Appreciate it, man. Keep safe.
You too.
Right on.
The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.